Hi, my name is Ken.
And my name is Jason.
And today we're playing Chaos in the Old World.
Chaos in the Old World was published in 2009 by Fantasy Flight Games.
It was actually designed by an Eric M. Lang, who also made Warriors, which is another fun little game, and also has helped develop a lot of Fantasy Flight's living card games.
Chaos in the Old World is set in the ancient Warhammer world, and each of the players takes on the role of one of the 4 Chaos Gods.
And while the gods all have basically the same victory conditions, they have very, very different approaches as to how to obtain them. Alright, so let's look at Chaos in the Old World.
So let's have a look at the components for Chaos in the Old World. This is the game board. These are the power sheets. These are the Old World cards and the Ruination cards. These are the various Old World tokens. These are the dice. And these are the various player bits. Each individual Chaos God has their own deck of Chaos cards, their own Corruption tokens, and their own figures. And now you're ready to set up.
First, place the board and set each dial to the start space. Then you may take the player bits, and you can do this randomly or decide based on who will destroy everything you hold dear if they don't get the green pieces.
Hint, that's Ken.
And distribute them among the players. Hand out the upgrade cards and the player sheets to each player. Also, there's a seating order in this game. Make sure you pay attention to the seating order. It's identical to the dials over here. Tuck your upgrade cards underneath the sheet on the side, not under the front, because, we're trying to play fair here. Place your power marker on the starting point on your sheet. This will be the little glowy number that's different from the rest. And place your victory point marker on the 0 space on the victory track. Separate all the token components and have them nearby. Luckily we have ours all in neat little bags here, so we don't really have to do a whole lot with that. Take the Ruination cards, place them in order of 1 through 5, and place them in the requisite space. Take the Old World cards, shuffle them up, and deal out 7 for a 4-player game, or 8 for a 3-player game. Take 2 Noble tokens, 3 Warpstone tokens, and 4 Peasant tokens. Shuffle the tokens all up together. Place one randomly on each region, starting with Norsica. There's actually an arrow that directs you to each individual region. Make sure each player is given their deck of Chaos cards. Each player then shuffles their deck and draws a hand of 3 cards. And now you are ready to play.
So, for Chaos in the Old World, each round consists of 6 phases. These are the Old World phase, the Draw phase, the Summoning phase, the Battle phase, the Corruption phase, and the End phase. Most of the time, each phase can kind of be done simultaneously by all players. However, when order matters, Khorne always goes first, and it goes clockwise from there. So again, in the order of the dials. So starting with the Old World phase, player with the lowest threat value draws the top Old World card, and immediately follows the italicized instructions. When I'm talking about the threat value, that's the number that's showing in the small window on the threat dial. So typically at the start of the game, assuming that Nurgle is playing, it's going to be Nurgle. So again, that player draws the top Old World card and does whatever it says according to the italicized instructions. Any decisions that have to be made on the card are made by that player. Now, some of these cards will say to discard it instead of adding it to the Old World track, so if it says that, then just throw it back in the box. You won't be needing it for the rest of the game. Otherwise, the card is placed in space 1 of the Old World track, right here. If there is already a card in space 1, then you're going to move that card to space 2 and place the new one in space 1. If there's already a card in both spaces, then the one in space 2 is removed from the game, so it's put back in the box. And again, the one from space 1 is moved over, and a new one is placed in space 1. So there's kind of a flow. Some cards may also instruct the player to remove all cards with the 2-tailed comet from the track. Do so before adding the new card to the track. Next up is the draw phase, and this may be done simultaneously. So each player will draw cards from his Chaos card deck according to the instructions on his sheet. So it'll typically say draw phase, in Khorne's case here it says draw 2 Chaos cards. Other gods may have different values. In the event that the deck is exhausted, then you just shuffle all of your discards together to make a new deck. And there is no maximum hand size, so you could theoretically have your entire deck in your hand if you wanted to. Next, each player moves their power marker to the highlighted spot. So that is the value that you always start the round with. Some upgrade cards may also give you additional power points each round, so then you would just move it up the requisite amount. It's important to note that power points do not carry over to the following rounds, so it's best to use up as many of them as possible. Next up is the summoning phase. This one is not done simultaneously, so it's going to start with Khorne and going to go around. In clockwise order, starting with Khorne, each player may choose to either summon a follower, play a chaos card, or pass. If the player chooses to pass, then they immediately set their power points to 0, and any players who have 0 power points are skipped for the remainder of the phase. The phase ends when all players have 0 power points. So if you choose to summon a follower, then the player selects an available follower, pays the listed power point cost, and places it on a valid region. The power point cost is listed on your power sheet, and you pay it simply by moving the power token down that number of spaces. The figure selected may actually be one that is not on the board or any follower currently on the board. You can actually choose to resummon them somewhere else. A player may not select a figure that he can't afford. Now, if the player has no figure on the board yet, he can place his first figure on any region. After that, he may only place figures in regions that he already has figures in, or any adjacent region. And as a little nuanced rule, and this may come up, if you're summoning a figure that is already on the board, then you can actually count that region as having a figure in it for placement purposes, even if it was the last. For example, if I chose to resummon this guy, even though he's the last figure in this region, you can still count that region, so he could still go into any of the adjacent regions. If you choose to play a chaos card, however, well, it's very similar to placing a figure. First of all, you choose a card from your hand. You pay the cost, which is listed at the top of the card in the circle, and you can play it on any empty space on the board. Only 2 cards can be played per region, and that's noted by the 2 spaces, one on either side of the name. If all 18 spots are full, then no more cards can be played. When a chaos card is played, its directions are followed immediately, unless it specifically says otherwise. In the event that 2 cards would happen simultaneously, which might happen, the left-hand card always happens first. It's also important to note that card effects are mandatory unless it states otherwise. Even if you play something and you don't really want to use it anymore because of something that happened, you have to, unless it says that you don't have to. Similar cards are also cumulative. You can actually, if you can manage to get 2 cards into the same region, you could double up there. Some cards will also have a magic symbol right next to the cost. Now, this doesn't really do anything on its own, but certain other cards will play off of that. So next up is the battle phase. With the battle phase, you start in Norska, and you follow the arrows to show you the direction in which you execute the battle phase in each region. And a battle is held in each region where any player has figures and a valid target. So if the region's empty, you can just skip it, or if there's only one person there, then you don't have to worry about that. Within each region, the battle occurs in player order, and again, that starts with Khorne and goes around. So this is pretty simple. First of all, the player totals the attack values of any figures he has in the region. And again, the attack values are shown on your sheet. They're the number next to the little axe. Once you have the total of your attack value, the player rolls that many dice, plus any modifiers they might have because of chaos cards or whatnot. And again, battle dice must be rolled. You can't choose to not roll battle dice. When rolling the dice, every time a 6 is rolled, this is called an explosion, and the player may roll an additional die, which could, in turn, trigger further explosions. Every 4, 5, or 6 rolled is a hit. The player assigns hits to other players' figures or peasant tokens. When a figure has been assigned hits equal to its defense, and that's the number next to the shield on your player sheet, it is knocked over. It still contributes its attack value, but it will die at the end of combat. Players must always assign enough hits to a figure to kill it. They can't simply damage it. If something has a defense value of 3, for example, like the Bloodthirster Demon from Khorne, then you can't assign it 1 hit and then assign the next hit somewhere else. You have to assign all 3 hits to it. A peasant token is removed as soon as it takes 1 hit. Once all of the players have had a turn, you remove any tipped over figures and continue to the next region. Next up is the corruption phase, and this is probably the most complicated of the phases overall. So it has sort of 2 sub-phases, the domination step and the corruption step. So first of all, for the domination step, starting with Norska and again going in the region order, you're going to calculate each player's domination value. And that is simply the number of figures that they have in the region plus the total card costs. So for number of figures, it doesn't look at cost of the figures, it doesn't look at attack value or anything, it's just the physical number of figures. And when I'm talking about card costs, it's the actual cost paid for the card. So in this particular situation, Khorne has one figure here, and he has a 2-cost card, so he has a domination value of 3. It's also important to note that the cards go by the printed cost. Sometimes that cost might be modified based on the card text, but that doesn't matter for these purposes. The player with the highest domination checks the resistance of the region, and if it is less than their domination, they score victory points equal to the conquest value. So the resistance is the number shown here in the red circle. In Norska, for example, it's 1. So using the example from before, 3 is definitely higher than 1, so Khorne would score victory points equal to the conquest value. Now, this is a nuance that a lot of people have a hard time with, but the conquest value is the same as the resistance value. You might ask, why is there two different numbers? Why not just say the same thing? Well, because certain tokens or certain cards might modify one or the other. We'll get into that in a little bit. In any case, if there is a tie, then nobody scores the region. And now we can move on to the corruption step. So again, this takes place in region order. And how this works is each player places 1 corruption in the region for each cultist he has there. And your cultists are going to be your lowest cost figures. After these corruption are placed, the total corruption amongst all players is counted. If it is 12 or more, then the region is ruined. Warpstone tokens are actually counted as corruption points for this purpose. If the region is ruined, then the top ruination card is drawn and placed on that region. Each player who has at least 1 corruption token there scores the listed points, and this is the points listed at the top of the card. So in this case, it says ruiners score 3 points each. In the event that there are no ruination cards left, ruination does not happen. Once a region has been ruined, chaos cards can no longer be played there, and that's shown by the card basically taking up both of the slots. Old world tokens cannot be placed there. Domination is skipped for that region from there on, and no more corruption tokens can be placed. Finally, we have the end phase. Now, the end phase is basically a list of little cleanup phases. They're all pretty simple though, so let's just run through them real quick here. So first of all players remove their chaos cards from the board and puts them in a discard pile. In each region with a hero, that's the token with the crossed swords here, the player with the most threat in that region must remove a figure. And again, this is the number in the small window is the threat value. And this is done 1 hero at a time, so if there are multiple heroes, then you look at them each individually. Next, you execute any instructions on any old world cards in the old world track that start with when old world cards are resolved. And you do this for card 1, then card 2. Next, you go through the regions in order, and players score the listed points on any ruination cards that are showing. So each ruination card will have a list of all of the different regions, and it'll have 2 values next to it. So you look up the relevant region, so in this case we're going with Norska, and it shows a 6 and a 3. The 6 is the amount of points that the person with the most corruption tokens gets, and the second number, the 3, is the amount of points that the person with the second most corruption tokens gets. If there is a tie for first place, then you add up both of these numbers together and split them evenly amongst all the players, rounding down. If there is a tie for second place, then the second place value is again split evenly amongst the tied players. Afterwards, the ruination card is flipped face down. Next, any player who has threat advancement tokens on their dial advances it once. The player with the most threat advancement tokens on their dial advances it an extra tick. If there's a tie, then nobody gets the bonus. All of the advancement tokens are then removed. Finally, you have to check for the game end. And there's a specific order, so I encourage you to refer to the rulebook for this part to make sure you get it right. First of all, you check all of the threat dials. If any of them are on the space that says victory, well, it's God victory, so in Nurgle's case, for example, it would be Nurgle victory, then that God wins. The tiebreaker being victory points. If none of the dials are on that space, Then next you look at the victory points. If any player has 50 or more victory points, then that player wins, with the tiebreaker being the threat value. Next, you check to see if 5 regions have been ruined. If they have, then the highest victory point wins, with the tiebreaker being threat. Finally, if the old world card deck is empty, then everyone loses. So it is actually possible in this game for everyone to lose. So that's how a turn goes. There are a few other miscellaneous things I want to go over here before we get started on the example turns though. First of all, let's have a look at the threat dials. Now there are 2 windows in each threat dial. There's a small one, which shows a number, and there's a larger one, which shows words. The smaller one always shows the threat value, and this is usually used to break ties. The large window shows the advancement rewards. So each time the dial is moved up or ticked, there's going to be a different award shown in that window. There are a number of possible rewards. Some of them, for example, might let you draw chaos cards, in which case you just draw them into your hand. Some say that you may draw nobles or warpstone tokens and place them, so you can place them in any region on the board. Some may allow you to remove corruption, so you can remove corruption tokens from the board, probably someone else's. Some of them may allow you to remove old world tokens. Now the old world tokens are pretty much any of the round tokens on the board, so that could be nobles, heroes, warpstone, or peasants. Some of them will straight up just give you victory points, so you just get that many victory points. Some will say that you get an upgrade card, and we're going to talk about how upgrade cards work in a little bit. And of course, there's one space on each dial that just says you win, so that one's pretty awesome. Next, we're going to talk about how each of the old world tokens works. So there are some event tokens. They basically just mark that there is an event occurring, and they have the 2-tailed comment on it, and that usually just refers back to the cards in the old world track here. Nobles, that's the one with the crown, they increase the conquest value of a region by 1. And this is where, again, it gets back to where the same number is used for the resistance and the conquest. So in this case, there is a noble in Norska, and the number showing is 1. Without the noble, the resistance value is 1 and the conquest value is 1. Because there is a noble, the resistance value is still 1, but the conquest value is actually now 2. Peasant tokens, which show a picture of a peasant on them, are basically just battle fodder. They are things that you can kill. Skaven tokens, and these are the tokens with the sort of 3-cornered wooden construct thing on them, they reduce the resistance of a region by 1. There aren't any on the board at the start, but they may get placed later on from various effects. And finally, the warpstone tokens simply count as 1 corruption when you're looking at the corruption of a region. Finally, let's have a look at the upgrade cards. So there are basically 2 types of upgrade cards. The first one is simply a follower advancement card. So this is going to have a new series of stats for one of your followers. So in this case, for Khorne, this upgrades his cultists so that they actually have 1 attack. Typically, cultists don't get any attack value. If you choose one of these cards when getting an upgrade card, you simply place them so that the stats are over the previous stats that were printed on the power card itself. There are also power upgrade cards, and these basically just give you additional powers or modify the ones that you have. So this card, for example, reads, draw 1 additional chaos card in each draw phase. So again, it's pretty simple here. Instead of drawing 2 cards during the draw phase, Khorne now gets to draw 3 if that card is in play. So that's how the game works. Now let's have a look at some example turns. So let's take a look at some of the example turns here. So first of all, we're going to start with the Old World phase. So for this phase, 1 card is drawn from the Old World deck by the player who has the lowest threat value. So looking at the dials at the start of the game, Nurgle is always going to start with the lowest threat value with 1. So that means Ken gets to draw the top card and execute the italicized text.
Peasant Uprising. Place 1 peasant token in every region except the Badlands. That's a lot of peasants, holy moly.
Khorne enjoys peasants because peasants have blood in them. And do you know what the blood god likes?
Cotton candy?
No, that would be blood.
While this old card remains in play, each peasant token on the board raises the resistance of the region it occupies by 1. Those tricksy little peasants.
So again, that's placed in the number 1 slot of the Old World track. And now we move on to the draw phase. So in this case, each player draws cards according to the number of cards that his sheet says he can draw. So Khorne is allowed to draw 2 Chaos cards.
Nurgle may also draw 2.
Now Tzeentch actually works a little bit different for drawing cards. So he gets to draw up to 5 every turn, basically. And he may choose to discard 1 first, if he wants. We're not going to do that, though. He's just going to draw, well, it's going to be 2 cards in this case, but anyway. Next is the summoning phase. So that's going to start with Khorne, and it's going to move around, and everyone's going to get to take a turn. So Khorne is going to start relatively conservatively, and he is going to take one of his cultist figures. So this is going to cost him 1 power point. So we move the power point tracker down, and he is going to place the cultist in Bretonnia. So now we move around the table to Nurgle, and Nurgle may choose to place a figure, play a Chaos card into one of the regions, or pass.
I am going to spend 1, and I am going to place a leper. I'm going to place in Norsca.
Alright, so then we move around to Tzeentch, which I am also playing in this case. Tzeentch is going to pay 1 to play the Meddling of Skaven into Norsca.
Hey, stop meddling.
And that reads, when you play this card, choose an opponent with figures in this region.
Hey.
That player must discard 2 Chaos cards from his hand.
Hey.
So now Nurgle must, of course, discard 2 Chaos cards. So then it moves back to Khorne. Now, Khorne's position is kind of tricky here because Khorne likes to kill things. And unfortunately, right now, he is far away from the things which could be killed. Namely, Ken. And of course, it's always an option that he could simply just start, placing dudes in regions leading up to it, but that would cost a fair bit. Luckily, he has a way around that. So Khorne is going to play the Blood God's Call for 2 points. That allows him, it says, when you play this card, immediately move up to 2 of your figures to this region from any other region or regions. So he's going to move his cultist over here.
Hey.
So that was Khorne's turn, so now we go back to Nurgle.
Alright, I'm going to pay 1 to put a leper into Troll Country.
Are you sure? I think there might be trolls there.
Look out! It's Troll Country!
Better than Back Country, I suppose.
Or Flavor Country.
So then we move on to Tzeentch. And Tzeentch is seeing there's a bit of a power vacuum in the center of the board at this point. So he's going to take advantage of that. He's going to pay 1 to play Temporal Stasis on the Empire. And Temporal Stasis reads, the cost for your opponents to summon figures to this region and play Chaos cards in this region is increased by 2.
That's very pricey.
Yes, it is. In any case, that was his turn, so now moving back to Khorne. Well, now Khorne has dudes in places where he can kill things. So, Khorne is going to summon one of his Bloodletters into Norsca for a cost of 2. Hopefully get some of that sweet, juicy Nurgle cultist blood.
Alright, gonna pay 1 to summon another leper.
Another? Lepers. So now we move back to Tzeentch, and unsurprisingly, Tzeentch is going to choose to place his first figure, which is going to be one of his cultists, in the Empire, for a cost of 1. Then we go back to Khorne, and Khorne is kind of a one-trick pony. He is going to place another Bloodletter in Troll Country. Now this takes Khorne down to 0 points, so Khorne is going to be skipped for the remainder of this round. That's all he can do this round. So Nurgle.
Well, Nurgle's not a big fan of this chase that's been going on here, so we're going to play Reign of Pus!
That is a very Nurgle-sounding card.
That's a very Nurgle-sounding card.
Yes.
So, Reign of Pus. The defense value of each of your figures in this region is increased by 1.
Okay, that brings it back around to Tzeentch. Tzeentch is going to choose to spread the love, and he's going to place a dude in Bretonnia. Then we move back to Khorne. Well, actually we skip Khorne because he's at 0 points, so we just go straight on to Nurgle.
Paying 1 to play another leper.
Tzeentch is still pretty much untouched by anyone else. So at this point, he is going to just play another cultist over there.
Khorne gets skipped, and we go on to the best god, Nurgle. So we're going to pay 1, and drop a Plague Bearer into Troll Country.
Alright, so moving back to Tzeentch. Tzeentch only has 1 point left. So what is he going to do? Well, basically he could only play a 1-cost card or play another cultist, and at this point his cards aren't entirely useful. So he's going to play a cultist, which is going to take him down to 0. And he is going to place that cultist, right here. So at this point, everyone is at 0 points. So the summoning phase is over. So now we move on to the battle phase, which is Khorne's favorite phase. So this is carried out region by region, starting with Norska. So looking at Norska, there is going to be a battle here because there are, 3 sides technically, because the peasant token is a valid target. So first of all, starting again in the typical god order, so with Khorne, we're going to add up attack values. So Khorne in this case has a single blood letter, which has an attack value of 2, which means he gets to roll 2 dice now, and he rolled 2 2s.
Yay!
That's not a good thing. Well, for Khorne anyway. I'm sure Kenny likes that a lot.
I like that a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a fan.
He doesn't get any hits, and he doesn't get to kill anything, which makes Khorne very mad. Ken is going to have an attack value of, I believe, 0, because cultists typically don't get any dice, so he doesn't get to roll anything.
No dice.
And, of course, the peasant is not an actual player, so he doesn't get to roll anything. So we move on. So we're going to move on to Troll Country. So again, Khorne has a blood letter there, so he is going to roll 2 dice. We got a 3 and a 4. Not great, but he'll take it. So he has 1 hit.
Normally, my characters have 1 defense, but because of the card I played in this particular region, they all have 2 defense. So this means that Khorne's little blood letter over here actually cannot hurt me.
I'm not concerned, though. There are some peasants to kill. That's what Khorne is going to do. He's going to kill a peasant. Now, unfortunately, Khorne's dial advancement condition is place a counter on your dial each time you kill 1 or more enemy figures in the same region in the same phase. Now, peasants, as you can see, are not figures, they're tokens, so they don't count. Khorne is sad.
Alright, now, I only have 1 attack because of my Plague Bearer that I put in that region there. But luckily that blood letter only actually has 1 defense. So it is possible I could actually take him out if I roll nicely. Nope, not enough. And that's all I have for attacking, and that's all the contested regions.
Yeah, so just to be clear, moving on, it's just cultists in the remaining regions, and none of these cultists happen to have any attack value, so we're just basically going to skip them.
However, if any of these actually had attack value, you could actually take your turn and you throw your dice to see if you would kill the peasants in those regions, if you wanted to.
But in this case, we just needed to do the 2 battles. Next, we move on to the corruption phase. First of all, we're going to start with the domination step, starting with Norska. Now, in this case, we're going to look at the domination values. So, Khorne has 2 figures and a 2-cost card, giving him a total of 4 for domination. Nurgle has 1 figure, which gives him 1, and Tzeentch has a 1-cost card, which gives him 1.
Well, that pretty much means that Khorne's going to take that region then.
Yep. So Khorne is the highest valued player, and there are no ties. So next we compare it to the resistance. So the resistance is actually 2, because there is the 1 printed value, and the peasant counts as +1 because of the old world card. 4 is higher than 2 though. So looking at the conquest value, again it's 1 plus 1 because of the noble. So Khorne gets 2 victory points. Next we move on to Troll Country. So Khorne only has a dude there, so that is only 1 point. Nurgle, however, has 3 guys plus a 1-cost card, giving him a total of 4. So since he is the person with the highest amount there, we compare that to the resistance of 1 plus 1 for the peasant, and that is higher, so he gets 1 point because of the conquest value. Next, we move on to Kislev. It's pretty obvious that Nurgle's 1 cultist is not going to give him that.
It's a really good cultist, though.
It's not that good.
Oh, come on.
No.
Come on.
So, because he doesn't actually meet the resistance, he is not going to get any points, and it's going to be the same in the 2 remaining regions with figures in them, because the resistance values are pretty high for the Empire and Bretonnia. Next, we're going to go on to the corruption step, which is Nurgle's favorite step. So again, we're going to go in region order. So each player is going to place 1 corruption token in each region for each of his cultists there. So starting in Norska, both Khorne and Nurgle have 1 cultist there, so they're each going to place 1 of their corruption tokens. Next, before moving on to the next region, we're going to count the total number of corruption tokens. So we have 2. That is not high enough for ruination to occur, so we move on. So in the next region, Troll Country, Nurgle has 2 dudes, so he's going to place 2 corruption. And in Kislev, he's going to place 1. And finally, in the Empire and Bretonnia, Tzeentch is going to be placing 2. Now, it's important to note here that Tzeentch's dial advancement condition reads, place a counter on your dial each time you place 2 or more corruption tokens in a region with 2 or more magic symbols and or warpstone tokens. This is where the magic symbols mainly come in. There is a magic symbol on the card that he's played there, and a warpstone token, so that gives the requisite 2, and he has placed 2 corruption tokens. So he actually gets to take one of the dial advancement tokens and place it on his dial. So, unsurprisingly, because this is, well, the first round of the game, no regions have been ruined, so we don't need to worry about that. Next, we move on to the end step, and again, this is just a series of little minor things. So first of all, everyone removes their Chaos cards from the board and places them in their discard pile. Next, we resolve any hero tokens that are on the board. There aren't any. Next, we look at the Old World cards and see if they have any text that says when the Old World cards are resolved. Next, we would score any ruined regions. Again, no regions have been ruined, so we can skip that. Next up is dial advancement. So, every player who has at least 1 advancement counter on his dial advances his dial by 1. So in this case, that would just be Tzeentch. So he's advanced to a spot that says place 1 warpstone. So he gets to take a warpstone token and place it wherever he wants. And where he's going to place it is the Empire. And he's going to do that because that means he doesn't have to worry about getting a magic icon on a card in there to trigger his dial advancement later on, so it's a good idea for him. Next, we look at whoever has the most dial advancement tokens. Again, that is Tzeentch, because he's the only one who has any. He gets to move an additional slot. And in this case, that means he gets an upgrade card. So he can look at all of his upgrade cards, choose one, and put it into play. In this case, Tzeentch mainly relies on his cards. His cards are usually low cost, and he likes to get a lot of them out. So he's going to play Deluge of Magic. And what this does is it lets him draw up to 6 Chaos cards instead of up to 5 at the start of the turn. Finally, we're going to check for game end. Now, obviously, the game is not going to have ended, but we'll go through all these steps just to show you how that works. So first of all, we check the threat dials to see if anybody has reached their victory condition. Nope. Next, we check to see if any players have scored 50 or more victory points. It's close, but no.
Yeah, no, we got it's pretty neck and neck over there.
Oh, yeah. But not quite there yet. Next, we check to see if 5 regions have been ruined. They have not. And finally, we check to see if the Old World card deck is empty. And nope, there's plenty of cards there. So then, we move back to the start of the round.
Alright, that was Chaos in the Old World. Jason, what'd you think?
Well, I really like Chaos in the Old World. I think it's a good game. I don't really get to bring it out enough, but that's something I can say about most of my games.
Well, that's very true.
One thing I really like is the actual artwork in the game. Like the board is very thematic. Everything looks nice.
Yeah, the board is super disastrous. For those who didn't really get a good look at it, the map is on a stretched, filleted piece of human skin. So
yeah.
So
I think they did a good job there. I do think that the rulebook is a bit disorganized. It's honestly not as bad as I've seen some of Fantasy Flight's rulebooks.
Though as much as I love Fantasy Flight games, that's pretty much par for the course. Their rulebooks are generally labyrinthine, and they're pretty terrible in general.
That said, though, they do have an index and glossary, which are always good additions. Yep. But what really strikes me is that at the back of the book, there's actually a section for each Chaos God explaining how to play them, and not only that, but how to play them against each other Chaos God.
Yeah, I was a really big fan of that. I thought that was a really nice touch.
It's a really great idea, so, anybody who hasn't played it before, it's not like the other person's just going to dominate you. Well, I mean, they still might, but...
Well, they still could.
It gives you, a bit of a leg up, instead of just, getting into the game cold, so...
I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about this game. I do actually play a little Warhammer, not as much as I used to. I felt like thematically, this game hit on a lot of really fun notes. The Warhammer universe is very dark in general, and their gods are terrible and horrifying, specifically the Chaos Gods. This is a really fun game. I would have to say that is definitely worth your time, for sure.
I think so.
The miniatures could use a little work. A lot of them are really like soft and got little pieces hell hanging off them and stuff. But I don't know if that's just a bad print or.
Well, that's a common problem with a lot of Fantasy Flight's games, particularly the older ones. I find.
Okay.
You would often open up one of their games and find half of the little pieces cracked off. And,
Yeah.
Particularly in this one with the cultists, they have the staff thing that falls off all the time.
There's not a whole lot, I guess, you can really do about that. It's a tiny little piece. Aside from making the miniatures bigger or making them out of hard plastic.
Well, yeah, and
that increases weight, increases cost. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons why you wouldn't do that for sure.
Ultimately, when it comes down to it, though, and I haven't availed myself of this capability, but I've heard that if you email Fantasy Flight, they are really good about it. Like, they'll just send you replacement parts.
I actually have heard that as well.
So
if you have like a piece that's basically unusable, they will generally send you another piece.
Yeah, so props to them on that.
Absolutely.
So numerically, Ken, if you had to put a number on how much you like this game, what would it be?
I haven't played Chaos in the Old World nearly as much as Jason has. I'm gonna say 4 out of 5. I think this is a really solid game. I think that some people might get turned off of the thematics, but as long as you are not of the weak of heart, I think that shouldn't even be an issue. I think the pieces are really nice. The rulebook is definitely better. The strategy guide is definitely nice for new players. It gives everyone not an even playing field, but definitely evens off the playing field as opposed to starting off from nothing.
Yeah.
I'd say 4 to 5. Jason, what would you throw at this?
Personally, I'm gonna go 4.5.
Okay.
5.
Yeah.
I do really, like I said, I really like this game. I think it's a nice self-contained game. There is actually an expansion for it.
That adds the Skaven God.
Yeah, that adds
right?
Skaven God, which I don't actually have, but it seems like it would be a good addition.
I feel like this game doesn't really need I like expansions. My friends will tell you I own like too many expansions, more expansions than board games. I don't really feel like this game needs to be expanded right immediately, although it does lend itself very easily to expansion.
Yeah, but overall, I think it's a solid game. For some reason, it seems to be really daunting to people.
Yeah,
I've talked to a lot of people now, and they all seem to think that for some reason that it takes like an entire weekend to play a game of this.
I think it's just because this is one of the things with Fantasy Flight games. They have some very excellent games, but they have some massive, massive, massive games. And I feel like that as soon as you say the word Fantasy Flight nowadays, a lot of people are like, "Whoa, buddy!" Generally speaking, I think all of their games are very good. They're very good at putting out really solid games. They're doing some really cool things with the Warhammer license. I do like Chaos in the Old World.
Yeah.
There's some other stuff they're doing. They're doing Blood Bowl Manager as well, right? They're the ones doing all of the.
Yeah, them and Games Workshop, they're like this now.
Yeah, right.
So
So they're doing some really good things with this, but if you say the words Fantasy Flight, generally speaking, most people are in for a long haul or not at all. So it's immediate turn off, which is funny because back in the day that used to be the name. If you said Fantasy Flight, like someone would be just all up on that.
Well, everything's kind of moving more towards Euro style games, a lot more
simpler and quicker games. A lot of people are leaning towards quicker games, and I feel like nowadays Fantasy Flight's actually pretty good at implementing the quicker side of games.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't really think we need to do this with this, and we haven't really done this for a little while. But what would you say is necessary to bring this up to a 5 for you?
I think it's kind of hard to say. I don't really have a tangible answer for that. I don't think.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
It's one of those things where I do really really like the game. I just don't think it's not at that 5 level for me.
It's not perfect for you.
Well, yeah, and that's just it. If I'm going to give something a 5, it has to be pretty much right there. And I don't think this is. It is still a great game though. So I can't recommend it enough. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me. How about you, Ken? Can you think of anything specific?
A couple things actually. I think we've railed on this before, but I'm not a fan of 3 to 4 player games. I feel like that is very limiting. I generally prefer games that are 2 to 5 players because 5 tends to be the number that generally sit around the table. I find more often than not you get about 5 players to a game, and sometimes 4. But having a game at a minimum of 3 players is sometimes not the best. Although in a game like this, having 3 players, I mean, since it's very competitive, having 3 players is kind of important because then you don't have just one player dominating another player for the whole game. In addition to that, having an upper limit of 4 players is simply because there are 4 gods of chaos.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you put in some other gods there, like they do with the Skaven god, and even then he's not technically a god of chaos, is he? I don't know. I'm not really too familiar with that side.
Depends.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not that into the, Warhammer canon that I can really
Sure, okay, yeah.
conversate on that too well. But
I'll ask some friends. But there's obviously a real reason why there's a limit of 4 players, because there's only 4 gods as far as chaos gods go. So I understand why, but in general, I just tend to prefer games that allow a little bit more players or a little less players. In addition to that, I mean, it's just the same Fantasy Flight things. It's kind of hard to get folks into. Everyone runs screaming when you mention Chaos in the Old World, despite the fact it's actually not that bad a game. As far as Fantasy Flight games go, it's not even really that long. I mean, you could probably play it for, I mean, it probably says, 1 to 2 hours, but that probably means more like 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, I'd say 3 hours is probably a good estimate.
Yeah. Probably more like 2 or 3 hours, though. I
Yeah.
feel like that's probably the fairest sort of run of that.
I-
Assuming everyone's on board. If no one's on board, then that's a killer right there anyway. So
I don't know. I think a lot of it too is people, especially if people see the rule book. It's there's 6 phases to a turn, and there's 6 sub phases to this. But it really, when it comes down to it, each of those things are okay, is this thing there? Then we ignore that.
Yeah.
It actually is a lot shorter than it seems.
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway.
Yeah, that'll give us a grand total of 8.5 meeples, which is very solid. This is a great game.
Mm-hmm,
I think it deserves that.
Yep. So that's all we have for today. So join us next time for Thunderstone Advance.
Until then, see you next time, and have good games.